Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. My name's Anna Sue. I'm an associate professor at the University of Toronto's Faculty of Law. I'm also a research lead at the Schwartz-Reisman Institute for Technology and Society. I'm very excited to moderate today's SRI seminar. I'm pleased to share a special milestone. Today marks our 100th presenter at the SRI seminar series. So from our humble beginnings in 2020, it's really amazing how far this series have come. And we couldn't be more pleased to be celebrating this occasion with today's distinguished guest, Professor Virginia Dignum. But before we begin today's session, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, Toronto has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. And while some of us may be joining from different places today, we invite you to reflect on the history and relations of the land that you're on. Now, a few logistics before we begin. Our speaker will present for about 50 minutes, followed by Q&A. And during the Q&A, we encourage participants to engage by using either the raise hand function in the Zoom meeting controls, or you can type your question directly in the chat box. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's session, Professor Virginia Dignum. Professor Virginia Dignum is a professor of responsible artificial intelligence at Umeå University, where she chairs the Social and Ethical Artificial Intelligence Group and leads the AI Policy Lab. Her research centers on the value-sensitive design of intelligent systems and multi-agent organizations, with a particular focus on the ethical and societal implications of AI. In addition to her academic work, Professor Dignum serves as a senior advisor on AI policy to the Wallenberg Foundations and chairs the ACM Technology Policy Council. And she holds a PhD in artificial intelligence from Utrecht University, was named a Wallenberg Scholar, and is a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of the Engineering Sciences. She's also a fellow of the European Artificial Intelligence Association and the European Laboratory for Learning and Intelligent Systems. Professor Dignum contributes to global AI governance as a member of the United Nations Advisory Body on AI, the Global Partnership on AI, UNESCO's Expert Group on AI Recommendations, and the OECD's Expert Group on AI. She's the founder of ALLAI, the Dutch AI Alliance, and is co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on AI. Previously, she was a member of the EU's high-level expert group on artificial intelligence and led UNICEF's efforts to develop guidance on AI and children. Her new book, The AI Paradox, explores the complexities of AI systems and will be published sometime soon, perhaps sometime this year. So we're very excited to have Professor Dignum with us today and are very much looking forward to her presentation entitled Beyond the AI Hype, Balancing Innovation and Social Responsibility. And so without further ado, Professor Dignum, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Maybe just to make it clear, both my participation in the United Nations Advisory Body and in the World Economic Forum have ended by the end of 2024. So my bio needs to be updated. I'm sorry about that, but the mandate of both, my mandate in both organizations ended last year.
Right.
Just to make it clear, no explain. Anyway, I'm speaking on my own personal capacity. I'm not representing any of these organizations here, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have also on the work of those organizations, again, from my own personal capacity. So without further ado, I will start sharing my slides, and I understand that I seemingly along the way changed the title, but the presentation is the same as I shared before, so just ignore the title. Anyway, talking about AI, talking about responsible AI, why we are doing it, what is it, what is the point of AI governance, are issues that are increasingly more important. And I'm at this moment speaking to you from New York, where I have been attending a meeting of the United Nations around the Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality. And in this environment here in the United States, it is clear that governing AI and taking taking a responsible approach to the development and use of AI are issues that are becoming more and more important and urgent, and maybe will be kind of being becoming more and more difficult to really achieve a responsible approach to AI. But anyway, to speaking about responsible AI and the governance of AI starts, of course, by acknowledging all the many different potential capabilities of AI systems. And this slide is a couple of months old, but every time I could replace it with yet new breakthroughs or new important applications in which AI has been used. We all are aware of that, and especially all of you that have some interest on the developments and the topic in general are aware of the important capacities and capabilities that these systems bring with themselves to leverage our own intelligence, to leverage our own capacity to deal with complex problems. And also, since a couple of months, we also need to acknowledge that AI is no longer some kind of fringe idea, but it's central to science as well, as we could see by the awarding of the 2 Nobel Prizes this year to AI-related issues. In the chemistry, it was to the application of AI to chemistry and to biology, and specifically the protein folding capabilities. So applications of AI are core to science, but the Nobel Prize of Physics shows as well that developments in AI are science in themselves and contribute to science by itself. So it is no longer, like I say, maybe some kind of fringe science, and I have been working in AI for almost 40 years now. So I've been through many of the different understandings and ways of viewing the field, and it is now landed as a core science. So it's important to acknowledge that. At the same time, we need to think about what are we doing and how are we addressing the development and use of AI. A lot of it starts from the idea, which is being propagated again and again, especially by those large corporations developing the many AI systems that the general public is aware and interacting with. The idea that we have in general is that AI means that more is better. We need more data, and having more data will lead to better systems. We need more computational power because more computing, quicker computing, more efficient computing leads to better systems, and we need more and bigger algorithms because that would be the way to deal with the complexity of the data and the computing the utilization of the computing capabilities. So the idea that we all kind of grow to understand is that for AI, more is better. But let's just take a step back and see what are we doing with the more, this idea of more is better. So we'll talk about data. This is a snapshot taken from work from Mozilla Internet Foundation. It's a couple of years old, but I believe from what I have seen from them that if anything, the distortion of the world is bigger now than it was. It's a snapshot showing us where is the data that AI is used, that is being used by AI systems to do whatever AI systems are doing. It is maybe not surprisingly, but unfortunate and difficult to accept that such a big distortion of the world exists, that AI doesn't really understand the world as we would like to understand, but as a very specific, is a very specific filter or focus in some parts of the world. And even in these parts of the world, the different communities, different organizations, different problems are differently available in the data that we have to train and to develop AI systems. Maybe also as concerning is to think that 50% of these data sets are connected to only 12 institutions. One of these institutions is in Europe, one is in Hong Kong, and all the other 10 are in the United States. So the distribution is skewed, and more data seems to be creating even a bigger skewing of this distribution of the data that we have. So let's move into the bigger and more algorithms. How is AI modeling the world? We that develop these systems and we that have been trained as computer scientists or AI developers tend to take the approach that AI is developed and should be developed as a rational system, a system that is that models preference, priorities, and outcomes of actions, and then optimizes for this preference. This is the basic principles of AI development, as for instance are being described in textbooks like the AI modern approach by Russell and Norvig. So the idea is that a better decision, a better understanding of the world, a better modeling of the world is one that optimizes for preference, that takes a set of preferences and decides what is the best preference based in whatever function that is designed to model this optimization. At the same time, we see that people don't really behave, and our own intelligence, our own way to model and to reason about the world is quite different from just taking an optimization approach. We are much more able to take, for instance, context into account, to including thinking about different ways and depending on the context, and including our understanding of what others would do, what other situations would be like. We are also much more able to deal with the incompatibility and inconsistency of those preferences and priorities and so on. And we decide based in many different motives than only the motive of or the idea of optimization, and also in terms of what we behave, we don't maximize forever. So there is a difference, and it's not necessarily a bad or undesirable difference, but there is a clear difference between the way AI systems reason, if you will, and people reason. There is also studies being done that show that this idea of optimization and of efficiency and rationality that we associate with AI systems are principles that are much more aligned with global north principles and stereotypes, and not necessarily aligned with the principles and the culture of the global majority. So in a sense, and if I would want to be very black and white, we are developing systems that optimize for problems that can be defined rationally, and we are hoping that those problems, that those ways of the ways that we solve those rationally those problems would also be able to help us solve complex societal problems. Now let's move on to the third of the more is better, which is the computational power and computational capacity. So how is AI using the world around us in terms of the resources that are needed to develop AI, to train these systems, to maintain the data sets, to maintain the computational going on. What we see, and any indicator that you see here can be replaced again and again, and there are many of these studies, but we can see in terms of energy, in terms of water usage, if we don't do nothing, then these systems are really taking and starting competing with us for those resources that we need for our own daily lives. Also in terms of investments, even if some may want to make us believe that investment is infinite. There are limits to what can be invested at any moment. And what we are investing in AI, we are not investing in other issues. And the questions and the decisions to do one or the other are, of course, political decisions that also need to be taken into account. At the same time, if you look how AI is impacting the world, we have done studies a couple of years ago analyzing all different papers that refer to the contribution of AI to the Sustainable Development Goals. And we see that whereas there is quite a lot of potential for AI to support and increase the capabilities that we have to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, there is also at the same time a lot of concerning about how AI is contributing to reducing our capability to achieve these goals. Of course, this can be discussed, and I could give a whole talk about these issues, but the point is that AI doesn't come for nothing, and the costs and the decisions that we are taking in terms of how much we are investing in AI, how much we are using natural resources to develop AI systems are not only political choices, but are also choices that come with very concrete consequences. Maybe as an anecdote here, or an example, in terms of energy, in the north of the Netherlands, there was some development of a huge data center and computational center for Microsoft, which claimed to be energy neutral and only using green energy and so on, which turned out to be correct. But at the same time, what they forgot to indicate is that all that energy that they were using for their own energy neutral claims was energy that had been before claimed by the municipalities in that region. And therefore, because of the data center and computational center that was built in that region, all the cities in the region no longer are able to use green energy, because there is only a limited amount of green energy in that area, and all those cities had to go back to the use of gray energy. So all these are choices, and choices that we need to be aware, and choices that we need to know that someone is making. And by taking responsibility, and so talking about responsible AI is also taking a concern for how choices are being made. Of course, and maybe today even more than before, there are increasing concerns about how AI is attacking and eroding our democratic institutions. Again, it's a topic that I could go on forever, but there are many more and many better authors and researchers that have been talking about these things and been concerning about these issues, which I encourage you to look if you are not aware of them. But indeed, the democratic oversight is something which is really eroding as we speak. Decisions and the control over all these infrastructures are not done by governments, are done by the tech companies. The corporate power, if nothing else, it is evident since last Monday the way that corporate was participating in the inauguration of President Trump here in the United States, but also the issues around the impact on human rights are all issues that anyone thinking seriously about the development of AI and about the responsibilities that we all have for the development and the use of AI cannot ignore. And again, I would point you to all these recent books in which many more expert people than me have discussed the issues. So what we can conclude of the little bit that I have been talking so far, that when we talk about artificial intelligence, the term is, and has been discussed by many, maybe the worst type of name that we could have given to this field, because AI is not intelligent in the same way that we talk about intelligence in people, for many reasons, many approaches, but we need to understand the intelligence in AI from a different perspective than we understand intelligence of persons. So it's not so much replacing our intelligence, but if anything, we need to think about AI as extending or augmenting our intelligence in different directions. But it's definitely not the same type of intelligence that people have. And at the same time, AI is not just artificial. It is built by people. It is dependent on the labor of many, and increasingly also the labor of those which are doing it in very appalling labor conditions for the tagging, the checking, the maintenance, and the development of the data sets and the training of the systems that cannot be done without human intervention. And at the same time, we also see the increasing competition for the use of natural resources by AI systems. At the same time, it's also important to realize, and probably I'm not saying nothing new to none of you, that the fact that these systems are able to manipulate language in a way that can fool us into think that there is some kind of intelligence there. It's important to realize that it is never and cannot be seen as a proxy for intelligence. It's more like a mimic or a simulation of intelligence, but it doesn't really can be understood as a proxy or a replacement for intelligence. So it means that as we go on and as we see the increasing impact, not always positive, but for a large part also affecting many different communities, many different groups, many different regions, that the impact of AI means, and the decisions for developing these systems, knowing the potential positive and negative impacts, means that we people need to be responsible and to have in place the instruments, the mechanisms, the institutions that support responsibility for these systems. We can never at any time in the development of AI accept some kind of reasoning. The computer said so. So how can we be responsible, knowing how large, how complex, how politically involved this type of systems are? Is responsibility something that is possible at all, or is more a chimera or some type of wishful thinking? How can we be responsible? So let's look at that. First, we need to realize that AI is more than just a technology, becoming more a social construct, a construct which requires then a multidisciplinary approach to understand, to critique, to discuss, to understand the positive and negative consequences in terms of how these systems are affecting our society in many different ways. So it is not anymore a technology that can be left, if you want, to the technologists to develop, to improve, to optimize, but is a construct, system that needs to be addressed by a combination of technology and all the other disciplines in order to really address not only the capabilities, what can we do with it, but also how is it going to affect our systems, and maybe even more important, why is AI a relevant or desirable solution for whatever the issue that is being taken into account. Start by taking responsibility for AI starts by understanding that AI doesn't happen to us. There is an increasing narrative being very forcefully imposed on us that AI happens. It's like the weather. We don't really know what it's going to be. We cannot control it. The only thing we can do is to decide how to address the consequences. Like with the weather, we would think, okay, let's take an umbrella because it seems that it's going to rain, or let's take some holiday and go enjoy the nice weather. That is becoming the kind of narrative that many are trying to convince us, to convince the general public that it's about AI. AI happens, we don't really understand it, it's very complex, it does much more than what we expect, it is much bigger than what we could think of, and therefore it is not something which we can control. We can only address the consequences. This is like I say, it's a narrative, and it's one which really hides, for all the negative reasons, hides the fact that AI is a design product of our own creativity. We people are making these choices. And the first question we need to ask is, who is making the choices? Who should be making the choices? What are the kind of values and the kind of criteria that are being used as the decisions are being made? And who are the we that are making these choices? And who are the we which are able to indicate what are the values that need to be prioritized and considered? So AI is a designed system. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like I said in my previous slide, is a social technical system, and is a system that is more than just the technical, the programs that are at the core of it, but it really needs to be considered. When we talk about responsible AI, we need to be talking about this social technical system rather than only talking about the programs or the software that is being used. This is also, like in any other technology, not a fix. Technology doesn't really fix all the problems that technology creates, and all the ways that we have to address the consequence of AI, the impact of AI, like ethical aspects, regulation, governance, and so on, are about the ecosystem. When we talk about responsible AI, we are not talking about giving responsibility to those software, to those systems, but we are talking about the responsibility of the social, organizational, and governmental ecosystem in which these systems exist. So the solutions or the ways that we have to address responsibility in AI need to be social issues than rather the technical solutions that can be considered. Which means also that the fact that AI is designed, that AI is something that we build, and yes, I mean that also when AI systems will be able to develop new AI systems, still at the core and in the further development is all based in decisions and options and issues that we people have decided. So the question is not so much about what is AI, but given that we have the capability and the duty and the right and the duty to build these systems, the question needs to be, what do we want AI to be? We people, we developers, we countries, we users, we governments, and so on. So, and there are many questions that we need to answer as we go about our responsibility for the systems that we are building. Starting, for instance, by the question, should AI be human-like? Firstly, what do we mean by that? Is that a human like me, like you, like Einstein, like a baby? Which kind of humans? What does it mean to be human? Is it that it speaks like a human, that it looks like a human, that it reasons like a human? So what do we mean by it? And also, more importantly, why should AI systems be human-like in some way, or in one way or another? These are questions that need to be answered by the organizations, the governments, the developers, the users of this type of systems. Another question that we have to ask ourselves, and that is often what we hear when people say, no, we don't really want AI to be human-like. That's all awful, and only problems are going to come out of designing systems to be human-like. We want these systems to be tools, right? Can go from there. But what do we mean when we are meaning that these systems should be tools? Tools are designed for something. So what is this tool going to be? It's going to be a tool for what? But also at the same time, we need to think about the affordance that comes with these tools. I'm left-handed. I cannot use a scissors as a right-handed person can use. So even a simple tool like a scissors come with affordances, with benefit some and prejudice others. So those are questions that need to be core to the design and to the decisions that are made around the design of AI and the development of AI systems. Another one is the difference between developing systems that simulate intelligence or that really operate in the real world. Like I said before, I have been working in the field for almost 40 years now. And at the beginning, so those old, dark, prehistorical ages of AI, the idea and the definition that we had at that time was that AI was the discipline through which we would build models of intelligence in order to understand human intelligence. So it was very much based on this idea of simulation, of trying to, by artificial or computational means, be able to study and understand better human intelligence. That's nowadays not exactly, or not, definitely not what we are doing with AI. AI systems are increasingly taking or supporting active interventions in the world. So, and the difference between building tools to understand intelligence or building tools to intervene in the world is a huge difference and needs to be also part of the considerations when we think about what do we want AI to be. And finally, and maybe the most important, do we want AI to be normative or to be descriptive? And by that I mean, do we want AI to represent and to deal with the world as the world is, do as we do, or do we want AI to provide us a better or a nicer world than the one we live in? And if we want a nicer or a better vision of the world, the one where there are no bias, one in there is no discrimination, one in which privacy is taken care of, and so on, who is going to decide and to define the norms that we want these systems to adhere to? Again, is a question that needs to be addressed, and it's a questions that are not going to be answered by the systems themselves, definitely not, and also questions that are not really being answered by the technologists, the engineers, the computer scientists. In computer science, we really are not trained to answer this type of questions. These are all questions that need a multidisciplinary approach. They need the humanities, the social science, the arts, the cultural approaches, the cultural diversity to be able to answer these questions. And these are urgent questions to ask ourselves, to ask our governments, to ask those that are providing us the AI tools that we are using daily. Moreover, if we continue about this idea, we are building these systems and therefore we decide and take the responsibility for what the systems are, we need to start thinking about what are the kind of decisions and which decisions should the AI systems make. Should we have systems that make decisions about our goals and our objectives, or do we rather have systems that only support us in the planning of those goals or objectives? Do we want systems that help us taking decisions that benefit the group, the community, the world in general, or do we want systems that benefit each one of us individually? Do we want a system that is good for me, or do we want a system that is good for all? And the way we design or we take these decisions are really crucial to the results and the capabilities of the systems that we are making. How should AI take decisions? What is a proper decision for these systems to take is a huge question, is a question that is extremely difficult to address, also with all the studies around AI ethics and so on. We do know that what is morally acceptable is not always what is socially accepted. What is legally allowed is not always what is morally desirable. So we navigate ourselves this type of complex space. We know that this is things which differ from one to another culture, from one to another time, from one to another country. Just think about how, for instance, capital punishment is considered in most European countries or in the US, the way that we used to look at smoking in public in the 50s and the way we deal with smoking in public nowadays. So it is a complex space. And if we are building systems that are going to take decisions which are have in one way or another some moral or ethical or societal impact, where in this space should the system be taking these decisions? And who is going to decide where the system should be operating in this space? It's, like I say, a huge complex question. It's a question that we are only now starting to scratch the surface to know how to address. And at the same time, we also know that it's easy or good to wish these systems to be adhering to as much as possible and to all moral principles that we could think of. But at the same time, we know that we cannot have it all. Who is going to make the decisions about the trade-offs that need to be made by the concrete implementations that we are building? So going back to how we do this, one of the ideas that has been increasingly propagated by the responsible AI, the ethical AI community, is the idea of question zero. Before anything is done in terms of developing any type of system, we need to ask ourselves, and we need to ask those that are in capacities of taking the decisions, should this AI system be built at all? Is an AI solution for whatever situation we are considered the best possible solution, or are other ways that we can use to address the type of issues that we are going to solve with AI? We need to really look at the purpose of the systems, and to do that, we need to consider what are the benefits and harms for society by building this type of systems. We need to think about responsibility beyond what is feasible to do and what is viable economically to build, discussing how that responsibility is going to be taken for the decisions, who is going to be accountable for what is going to be built. How can we prevent, or how can we prioritize the resource allocation that it's needed to develop these systems? And finally, it is important to have the involvement of as many different stakeholders and ensure that all voices are heard in order to answer this question in a way that benefits the situation in which the system is going to be developed. So question zero is kind of crucial to all what is done around responsible AI. We can talk a lot about governance. So how are we going to do that? What kind of regulations, what kind of rules, what kind of principles and guidelines? Maybe simpler than that is to look at it from a simple metaphor. We also don't build cars without brakes. We don't build cars without seat belts. We don't build cars without airbags. None of those things contribute to the speed of the car or the capability of the car of moving forward, but we don't accept any car in the world to go around without the seat belts and the brakes and so on, as well as we don't accept that medicines are put into use without going through clinical trials, and we don't accept airplanes to go into the air without the proper verifications, controls, and standards. At the same time, if you don't have rules, if you don't have ways to decide what is proper or not, we also are in a situation in which no one is really can understand how progress is going to be made. So it is important to look at regulation, looking at the governance of these systems, not as an add-on to the development of the systems, not as a barrier for the innovation that we can achieve with AI, but exactly as the baseline and the ground from which we can innovate, and from the ground from which we can provide the trust that is needed for the systems that are being built. AI without regulation, AI without principles is not possible to, in the long term, will not really be sustainable. There is a lot of work, and you probably all are very well aware of all the work that has been done in the last, I would say, decade or a small decade by many different organizations, from very large international organizations to very small topical, regional or sectorial organizations. So there is a lot of work here. There is a lot of awareness, and that is something which is really a huge difference from 10 years ago to now. When we would start talking about these issues, we would be laughed at or ignored. But nowadays, there is a clear recognition from governments, from international agencies, from standard organizations, from sectorial associations, from anybody, that we do need to have some principles, some guidelines. Fortunately, those principles and guidelines, they don't really differ so much from each other. They all are talking in abstract levels about the same things. And that is maybe also the core of it. Most of these guidelines and principles are discussed and described at a very abstract level. It's easy, or at least easier, to say that we want these systems to be transparent or unbiased or aligned with human rights than it is to understand and to agree what do we need to do to really make sure that the systems are indeed transparent, aligned with human rights or unbiased. And maybe even more difficult it is to verify and to decide how can we verify that indeed the systems that we are building are aligned with these principles and guidelines. Nevertheless, it's important and it's good to see that there is a global recognition that we do need some principles and guidelines to support the development of AI in ways that are beneficial to society and to all of us. Maybe the last one in this effort was the work done by the United Nations in this advisory body that I was last year, which was not so much about developing yet again a set of principles, but much more discussing what kind of instruments need to be in place to allow for the discussion and for the conversation, to have a global dialogue about what needs to be done in a way that includes all the many differences and reflects the situation of different countries, different cultures, different realities. I encourage you to look, it's available online. It was also the recommendations that we made in this document have been included in the Global Digital Compact that was agreed by the last General Assembly. How it is going forward within the United Nations, it's, I would say, beyond what I can tell. As I said at the beginning, this group, the advisory body, our mandate ended in December. So now it's up to the agency, the United Nations agencies, to take up the advices and the suggestions that are made in this document. When we talk about governance, and maybe before going into some examples, it's good to remember that it is not just about legislation. It's not just about the idea of creating laws that govern or that limit the way that these systems are done. First, legislation is not just about forbidding things. In many cases, legislation can be about supporting or directing things in another direction. There are many forms of legislation, but in any case, when we talk about legislation, we talk about a form of governance which provides compulsory directions to follow, and also comes together with some instruments for formal instruments for the enforcement of those directions. Another way that is considered very often, and it's not necessarily different, but supports legislation, but can also be taken independently from legislation, is the idea of standards. Standards are what often is called softer governance. They are not mandatory to follow, but often are strongly advised within a sector or within a region. And also demonstrate the due diligence and limit the liability of those that adhere to the standard, because they are somehow protected by the fact that they are adhering to a specific standard. And moreover, it also supports the integration and the collaboration and between different products and services and applications and solutions in ways that really support also development forward. Other ways of regulation or of governance, include the design, the development, the transformation of organizational process and functions. To design within organizations how and what are the issues that the organization wants to be aligned with, what kind of issues they want to monitor, to check that they are really doing within their own organization. And in sometimes this type of process goes so far that within the organization there are ways to veto or to modify any projects or deliverables that do not adhere to their own internal guidelines. A lot of work also needs to be done in terms of the monitoring and assessment, so providing tools and methods and approaches that support organizations and governments to really measure and assess what is being done, taking into account that is not just about ticking boxes or to develop whatever you want and at the end check how many boxes of the responsible assessment list you followed, and then by that think that you have the work done. And at the same time, we also need to look at ways to develop and to look at the maturity, the different levels of maturity. Of course, nothing of this can be done well without education and training. And I see that I need to speed up to be able to have sufficient time for interaction after the talk. Just some examples of the AI Act. I'm not going to go into details here. I'm going to share the slides, and I'm happy at any time now in the Q&A or later to also answer any questions you may have, taking into consideration that I'm not an expert in AI Act. I have been involved in many of the European activities around the AI Act, but I'm not directly involved in the AI Act. Issues of global governance. I think I already told a little bit about the work of the United Nations, the way other organizations are involved at different level. What the United Nations proposed, like I said, it's not yet another set of principles, but more a set of proposals to create a space for global and international dialogue, starting with common understanding and means for common understanding of what is AI, what is not AI, what are the implications, what are the possibilities, what are the techniques, and so on. Also creating the capabilities for common ground, to have ways to have a basis which we all agree on how to set the minimum requirements for AI systems to be developed and deployed. And finally, ways to address the common benefits and to share the capabilities to make benefits available to all. I'm also not going into this one. I'm again happy to answer any questions and to share the slides with you. This is just showing an overall overview of the many different types of proposals that we have seen in the last couple of years in terms of principles and guidelines for governance of AI. So let's go back to the question, can we be responsible and how can we be responsible? This goes back to the way that most of these discussions are being held at the level of the organizations that are developing these principles and guidelines, that are developing the legislations, the standards, and so on. In many cases, what we see is that the discussion is about I see there is a question now. Is that something which you want to clarify at this moment, or could be done later in Q&A? Phil has raised a hand.
Uh, Perhaps we can, sorry, I think Phil, I think Professor Dignum is almost at the end of her presentation, so perhaps we can like do that at the end. Is that possible? Oh, Professor Dignum, please continue.
I don't hear nothing, so I continue. So most of these organizations, when they are talking about governing, about legislating, about regulating AI, they are looking at, let's say, what I call the tip of the iceberg. They are looking at the AI applications that we are aware of, that we interact with in our daily lives, if you want. They are considering legislating, regulating, governing things like the chatbots, the recommender systems, the decision tools that are around. Like I said, this is the tip of the iceberg. And if we look at the whole chain and the whole stack of issues that need to be in place in order to achieve these chatbots and recommender systems and so on, we are looking at a very large set of different instruments, different applications, different processes, different infrastructures, which are can be described nicely or and structurally in this figure that I'm showing you now. I'm not going into details, but just showing that there are many, many different layers and many different issues that need to be put in place in order to have whatever chatbot or recommender system we are interacting with at the moment. We also see that at this moment, all these layers are being controlled and in the hands of a couple of organizations, which means that instead of having this nice structured stack of layers, what we are looking is a kind of a Play-Doh in which if you imagine each of these layers as a different color of Play-Doh or plasticine, and you have the power to combine them in whatever way you want because you are active as organization at all of the different layers, what we get is a big blurb of Play-Doh in which there is no color anymore, there is no differentiation between the layers, and there is no clear, transparent way to understand what comes from where. So the problem that regulators and governing institutions are going to have is the fact that as we try to regulate the tip of the iceberg, we are confronted with this huge blurb of Play-Doh in which it becomes very, very difficult to address the complexity of the ecosystem. In many other types of technologies, instead of this big blurb, there are clear rules and clear definitions about how to move from one to another of the layers. Those issues are at this moment not available in AI. But nevertheless, there are ways through which we can, even without any legislation, even without any regulation around, there are ways but which each of organizations, companies, smaller or large, that are developing AI systems can start taking responsibility for what they are doing, starting by committing and understanding and deciding for themselves what kind of responsibility and trustworthy principles they would like to align, understanding that there is always tensions and between all the different principles and that there are trade-offs that need to be made, continuing creating a culture or a system of responsibility within the organization, and at the same time prioritizing and the transparency of what they are being doing in terms of interactions with their stakeholders. this is work that I recently was done in this group at the World Economic Forum, which you can also download, in which we provide if you like, step-by-step approach to guide the development of artificial intelligence towards shared principles, so a process of value alignment in which we'll really look at not only the technical considerations, but also the societal and organizational aspects that need to be put in place to be able to take the responsibility and accountability for what the technology is that has been developed in very many concrete steps that are further described also in this document. And in that way, we really can get to the trust and the systems that are not efficient, not only efficient, but also in line with the regulations or the principles that have been agreed upon, which ensure that the processes by which we develop AI are also responsible. And ways that support the tracing and mitigating bias and all other types of negative effects. A lot of this is starts by the idea that we need to be explicit and transparent, not only about the code and the data that we use, but also, and more importantly, about the choices that have been made and the options that have been considered and the decisions and the group that has been being involved in making those decisions. All of this it can be supported by simple tools like just keeping a log and a documentation of all the choices and options. I'll just go to the end. Maybe, and going back to the idea of this AI, the rational AI paradigm that we had starting the talk, AI, we need a new paradigm for AI, recognizing that AI is not a universal solution, that there are other ways to address problems and to address complex situations, societal situations. Remember the issue of the question zero, the issue of answering in a way that is responsible and accountable for. Should we be using AI for whatever we want? We need also a paradigm development and modeling of AI that is able to address the inherent risks of bias, discrimination, safety, and so on. That recognizes that we need to go further than just the technical capabilities and the technical optimization of the problems, but at the same time is aligned and includes the technical standards of verifiability, sustainability, and participation. So instead of sorry, I don't know what's happening here. Instead of the blurb, the Play-Doh that I showed before, and the way that we are currently developing AI systems as a kind of trial and error and gluing code and putting different libraries together, we need to move into an idea which is more close to the Lego than to the Play-Doh. A way that is modular, that is layered, that is hybrid, that is bounded and heterogeneous in order to support the flexibility and the transparency that is needed in order to be able to say something about the responsibility and accountability in a way that provides clear separation of concerns between all the different aspects that need to be put together, in a way that accepts that there are more solutions than just the bigger than bigger putting data together and using generative AI to address all that data at the same time, in a way that provides alignment, accountability, and preventing that the systems get out of bounds from what they are being developed for. And finally, ways that include the principle of heterogeneity in order to be able to include and to combine many different approaches, many different techniques, many different theories and models. Of course, there are a lot of challenges related to this paradigm, and we are just now starting looking at it. And maybe what we can think about, and there is a very clear link between this type of paradigm, distributed and modular paradigm, with the idea of AI agents, which at this moment are being defined and sold, if you want, as, let's say, a ChatGPT that can act independently from whatever you do, not just reacting to what you ask, but proactive, taking care of issues to you and to develop assistance, which actually is nothing new. All this idea of intelligent agents that are autonomous, that are able of reactive and proactive activity, and have some type of social ability to interact with you. These are principles that come from a paper from 1995 by Michael Waldridge and Nick Jennings. So already at that time, this type of issues have been discussed. And since then, the agent community, research community have been addressing that. But not so agents is more than just the development of the individual agents, is also about the idea of combining agents, heterogeneous agents, into some capability to address bigger problems than what each of those agents could deal with by themselves. And this is where this new paradigm is aligned to it. We need to think not only about the autonomy of these agents, but also the capabilities of how can agents interact with each other? How can agents be more focused and learning from smaller size data, and together, by coordinating their interactions, be able to address the same type of complexity as the very large generative models that we have at the moment, and how these systems can cooperate with each other. Again, here, this is work that is already almost 20 years old. And already at that time, we moved from the idea that we can leave the coordination to the agents themselves by self-coordination, to ideas in which we need to provide either contracts or regulations which support the way that the agents have to not only interact, but also guarantee that those interactions lead to the desired approach and the desired goals and the results. So responsible AI is innovation. It's not against innovation. Regulation is not against innovation, but is innovation. And we need to look at innovation not only from the perspective of technology, but also from the perspective of the organizational, the regulation, the governance, the social issues that are needed to address the complexities of systems in a way that we can really say that, this one should be gone, that it is responsible AI is not a choice. We cannot have AI without having responsible AI. It is not an alternative to innovation, is stepping stone for innovation. And I would like to stop here and open the floor for Q&A. Thank you so much.
We're now moving to our discussion period, and we welcome questions from everybody. Phil was raising his hand earlier. Okay, Phil, please. And then Phil. And then Torin.
I don't know if Phil is mute. Yeah.
Okay, perhaps.
Yeah, you didn't let me unmute, but
Sure.
now really.
Okay.
It seems to me the general concept of your talk is the contrast between the will to power and the will to harmony. And it seems to me, I wonder which way to approach that, because I have two questions. It seems to me the will to harmony is really the will to morality in a way. And it seems to me that we have a long history of the will to power. You have to somehow deconstruct the will to power, at least partially, to create openings to the will to harmony. But I have a further question. Even the will to harmony seems to be very biased to humanism. which, by the way, I'm for. Okay, I'm not arguing against that. But how does that affect the harmony of nature itself, of ecocycle? Because we have totally destroyed that and turned nature into a reserve uh, for our use, a material for our use. So is that itself the will to harmony too small of a circle than to include ecology in a broader sense? Because we have totally, 90% of our mammalian species has been domesticated. There are no more wild animals. The choice for animal is to exist in a zoo or not exist at all. Could you say something about that limitation? Because that even the will to harmony is too limited.
Interesting question. I'm not sure if I fully subscribe the idea that there is a world of power and a world of harmony. We have one world, and we have to deal with that world for the better or worse by dealing with harmony, with power, with nature, with humanity, all at the same time. We don't have the luxury to deal with issues separately because all of it is complex. Interacts in very complex ways, in which is then one of the points to doubt or to question, if you want, the idea that AI will solve it all for us, because it is so complex that one type of technique, one type of approach definitely will not be able to address all the complexity. I think that we do need to make choices, and the choices that we are making and we have made so far are very much led by the idea that, let's say, a techno-solutionism approach, the idea that technology is going to solve all our problems, that by developing technology, we are necessarily developing a better world for ourselves. And I think that that is the issue that we need to question, and the issue that we need really to start addressing urgently. Technology can support our lives, but is definitely not the solution to all our problems. And we do need to start having the conversations that are needed to understand that there is more to it than just technology by itself.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dignum. Torin?
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, thanks for your talk. So I was thinking, it seems that AI development is concentrated in a very small number of countries. And I'm wondering if you could comment on what that means for the prospects of sort of international agreement on what sort of regulations there should be. To make an analogy, there are international treaties which ban nuclear weapons and landmines, but the major powers, which have most of those weapons, have just not signed those treaties.
Yes, that's an important question. And I would say it's not just a fact that AI development is being concentrated in a small number of countries. It is mostly being concentrated outside of the national sovereignty and the national government. So it's outside of our democratic process. It is being concentrated in the hands either of authoritarian regimes or in the hands of commercial corporations. So we are losing, and we have probably lost the democratic control and the democratic accountability for the type of systems that were being used. Definitely, and it maybe not definitely for other countries, but also for the countries in which AI is being developed. We don't have the power to intervene because we left it to the hands of the corporations. So national sovereignty, it's an issue definitely outside of those countries, but also inside those countries because they are out of our control. And that I think that is one of the biggest worries and the biggest issues that we need to address. How can we keep and do, if anything, about the capability to to inspect, to control, to monitor, to demand accountability for this type of systems if they are being developed outside of any governmental authority. I unfortunately don't have the answer or the solution for it, but it's an issue that needs to be urgently addressed. And that was also a lot of the discussions that we had with the United Nations Advisory Body.
Okay, thank you so much, Torian. Graham?
Hi. Many people have argued that, at least in principle, future developments in AI could result in conscious or moral beings to which we would have to give some kind of ethical rights. And moreover, some have argued that this is likely to happen in practice or is even inevitable. I suspect from everything you've said and not said that you do not yourself believe that, but nonetheless, accepting that it's a legitimate point of view, how should it factor into AI governance? And in particular, would you see a role in AI governance in actively preventing the emergence of conscious AI that would result in some great moral morass that we would then have to deal with?
Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, is not an issue that I believe in. I don't see anywhere and no argument whatsoever which shows that is theoretically and practically possible to create consciousness out of statistical equations, which is basically what these systems are. So it is also not, in a sense, intelligent. We tend to associate intelligence and conscious with each other because that's what we see in human beings. But intelligence and consciousness are, in a sense, orthogonal to each other. And by developing more intelligent systems, there is no evidence, at least that I have been able to find out, that more intelligence leads to more conscience. They are kind of moving, they are different directions in human characteristics. Having said this, and I agree that it's a highly debatable type of issue, but the other one which I don't really buy, if you want, is the idea that if these systems are going to be conscious, they are necessarily going to be against us or taking over the world, or so why a conscious system is not able to, and a super intelligent system not able to address the consequences of this type of behavior. Also, I don't understand why that would be a case. So if they are super intelligent and conscious, probably they would be much more interested in maintaining and solving the environmental and societal issues than to extinguish all of us. That's again another type of discussion that is debatable. But finally, if imagining that we build conscious and intelligent systems, then we do have the instruments, we do have the organizations that are able to deal with our own behavior as conscious entities and agencies. So why would those systems not be able to adhere to the same type of regulations and rules that we have for ourselves? It is also an issue, a question that we need to address and to question ourselves. So there are a lot of wishful thinking, if you wish, in this type of idea. There is also very much, to my idea, very kind of black and white, cutting corners type of reasoning, which doesn't really address all the complexity of why is intelligence leading to conscious, how is statistical equations ever leading to intelligence or to conscious, and why are then those hypothetical conscious systems not going to be able to be addressed by all the instruments that we have to deal with our own consciousness. You are
Okay.
I don't want to debate it, but I didn't want to suggest that such systems would be adversarial to us. I just wanted to suggest that their mere existence would lead to lots of moral questions for us, and whether governance had a role in actively preventing the problems that could arise thereby.
Okay, so just to so as you can understand from my answer, I don't really believe that we are going to build those systems, at least not in the way that we are trying to build them now. So that's one. I do think that if we are going to build conscious systems, then we do have the regulations that can deal with this type of systems, because we can deal with our own conscience. Whether or not we should desire to build this or allow to build these systems, that is another question. That is a question which is maybe much bigger than the answer that I have here now. But I would advise you to look at the work, for instance, of Joanna Bryson, in which she often says that we have the moral duty to not build systems for which we need to be morally accountable for.
So much. Sharon?
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. I was thinking a lot during this about how we could bring some of these messages into the classroom. So I might end up teaching introductory machine learning or introductory AI. So to students who aren't necessarily thinking about the social impacts of it, who might be seeing themselves on a technical path in the future, how can we get some of these messages like the solutions can't just be technical, they have to be social too, and we should ask that question zero. Do you have any suggestions on how to bring those messages into like introductory courses at the undergrad level?
Very important question. Thank you for it. Yes, at the same time, my group and the AI Policy Lab, we do work on concrete materials for classrooms. So I'm happy if you contact me offline, I can point you to some of those materials. But I would say that at the introductory level, it is important to start by not only by the technical capability of whatever system we are building, but start by the context in which that system can or will be used. And by opening the discussion and the addressing the development of AI from the societal context in which it's going to be used, naturally you will see that students are going to be much more aware of what should or should not be done, what options they are there. So it's also up to us to start with the question zero, let's say. Start your class with the question zero, and then maybe you'll see that naturally students will be very receptive to understand what are the consequences of what they're doing.
Thank you so much. Maybe we have time for one more question. We have James.
Yeah. You talked about AI intelligence as rational. Does that mean that it's limited to rational intelligence and does not include emotional intelligence? Because AI, you're describing it as interactive, right, with the social field and with other human beings and so forth. So it seems to make sense that they would also be able to simulate emotional intelligence. But do you think that's a possibility, or is that also something that's available in the algorithms of AI?
Okay, thank you for the question. I will try to clarify. So when I talk about rational paradigm, is about the way, the paradigm that we use to understand and to model AI systems, like I say, as systems that optimize between a set of preferences and maximize that and optimize the behavior based in this type of optimization issues. Yes, by taking this model into consideration, it is possible to build systems that simulate emotional intelligence. But I would stress that the simulation aspect. I don't think that the way that we have at our disposal at this moment to build AI systems is able to really address emotions in the way that we address, because a lot of the emotional aspects that we have are biological and not necessarily able to be rationalized into the type of mathematical equations that we use to build and to design AI systems. So the rationalization, the rational aspect is on the engineering of the systems, but indeed taking a rational engineering approach, it is possible to simulate some type of emotional understanding of emotions.
Okay, thank you so much. We have time maybe for one more question. Phil has a repeat question. Phil,
Yeah,
please keep it short. Yeah.
I want
Is
to
it a
ask you.
question?
I want to ask you, like, your rejection of the will to power. It seems like that's been the history. There's going to be a seminar coming up from the Hellenic Center at UCSD, which talks about the glory and the violence of the Iliad. It reminds me of the fact that was the Iliad, in a sense, the beginning of modernism in this sense. Odysseus invented the Trojan horse. The cleverness of his invention, in a sense, truncated the Trojans, you know, particularly whose name, God, I forgot his name, but the hero of the Trojans, Hector. Yeah, Hector. Hector was the moral person. Cleverness defeated morality.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be the beginning of what the history ever since then, through Hegel, that talked about the relationship of power to unity of social structures. So I want you to say something about that.
Thank you for the comparison. I don't reject the world of power. What I think is that we cannot separate the world of power from the world of harmony. Both of them are necessary, are issues that we need, and we need to address harmony or morals together with power, and not try to separate them and solve, if you wish, the power issue without taking the morals into account, or to solve the morals issues without taking the power into account. We need to really look at it as two sides of the same coin and to address both of them together. So I definitely don't reject the world of power. I just say that we cannot look at the world of power without looking at the world of harmony at the same time. They are inseparable.
Okay, I think maybe I'll exercise my moderator privilege and just ask the last question. I guess, like, from your presentation on responsible AI, I'm just wondering, like, given the imperatives of responsible AI, I'm just wondering how you incentivize the very limited number of players, like, you know, like big technology corporations, into adopting these kinds of not following laws, but also like adopting these kinds of standards for themselves. And is then the burden on the government or like some other nonprofit to come up with alternatives to these, but given that they don't have enough resources, like how do they compete with these kinds of corporations? So I'm just wondering, like, in your experience from all of these forums, in terms of AI governance, like how do you like broaden the ecosystem so that like the main players are also incentivized to follow the rules?
Okay. If you
I
had
mean, I know
asked
it's
me
a big
that
question, but
if you had asked me that question a couple of weeks ago, I probably had an easier way to answer it. Today, it's a more complex question to answer. But so still at this moment, I believe that most of the large corporations are very aware of their responsibility. They don't really accept it or acknowledge it in the same way that we. But increasingly, what we have been seeing as a development is that large corporations were taking steps towards responsibility in terms of addressing bias, addressing transparency, addressing the environmental impact of what they are doing. Most of those corporations had groups or departments within their organizations addressing these issues, also because it's, at the end of the day, an economical issue. If we don't, if we reject their products because they are not aligned with our principles, they don't have a market for their products, putting it in some very black and white economical thing. So there was a clear development and a positive development towards the big corporations being aware and taking steps, not always in the same way, not always in the same direction, not always at the same speed, but really there some acknowledgement that they also need to do something about it. At this moment, and especially in the United States, what we are seeing is that they feel that there is much more to gain to get into the Wild West and start doing whatever they want in whatever way they want. I don't know how long that goes, and definitely I don't believe that that is a long-term sustainable approach. Soon they will see that the Wild West doesn't really pay off. But hopefully it's sooner than later, but I'm very afraid that it will take some time. The other way to go is from a governmental perspective. For instance, what the European Union is doing in terms of protecting the use of and determining how AI can be developed, used, and also deployed within the European Union. So we put in Europe rules to what we get in. Of course, how are we going to enforce those rules, and how much power do we have to maintain those rules? It will be an issue to see how it is being developed. But that's the other approach, to have the government deciding this is what we accept, this is not what we don't accept. And if you want to survive within our region, then you need to align to our rules. This is what they call the Brussels effect, and the Brussels effect has been successful in many other areas. How much is going to be, again, we are since this week in a different geopolitical, so I don't really know. But indeed, I think that it is at the end of the day a matter to all of us. We are the users, we are the ones that are impacted and impact the way these systems are developed. So all of us also can take our own responsibility in terms of what we use, in terms of what we don't use, and especially using our voice to let know what we agree. And then again, there is the role for the civil society to take a stance on it. It's difficult, and it is more difficult now than it was a week ago, unfortunately.
Right. On that note, thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation and for engaging with the audience. Thank you to everyone for staying and for all of your questions. This concludes our seminar, and please join us next week. We'll have Professor Rahul Krishnan, professor here at U of T. He's going to be giving a talk called From Associational to Causal Predictions with Deep Learning. And so we look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, thank you so much, Professor Dignum, and thank you, everyone. Goodbye.